Beneath the ice and silence of the Arctic, some of the deadliest predators from the Ice Age are still lying in wait. Saber-toothed cats, ancient wolves, and cave lions so fresh, scientists are considering cloning them. These are terrifying frozen creatures scientists are too afraid to defrost. Deep in the frozen wilds of Siberia, a creature straight out of prehistoric times was found curled up in the permafrost, a baby saber-toothed cat. It was discovered in 2020 near the Indigirka River, and despite being over 35,000 years old, the thing looked like it had only been dead a few days. It had thick fur, skin, claws, even its internal organs. It was all still there, and yes, the tiny sabers too. Scientists think it might have been buried in a landslide and flash frozen before decay could even start, and wasn't alone. Another cub, a few years younger, was found in the same region, preserved the same eerie way. But nobody's rushing to thaw these little killers out. The deeper they look, the more they realize just how little they know about these ancient predators. There's something about seeing a baby version of something so dangerous, though, that just hits different. Like, it's cute, but also very much not. In 2016, a gold miner working near Dawson City in Canada's Yukon Territory came across something in the permafrost, a perfectly preserved Ice Age wolf pup, frozen for over 57,000 years. It wasn't a skeleton or a pile of fur and bones, it was an entire wolf, with skin, fur, tiny claws, even some of its whiskers were still intact. Genetic testing showed that it came from an ancient extinct branch, older than modern gray wolves, and adapted to a world most humans wouldn't survive 5 minutes in. They think it died inside its den. Maybe the roof collapsed, maybe the ground shifted, but either way, something sealed it in tight and froze it solid before decay had even had a chance to start. And that kind of preservation doesn't happen unless the timing is perfect, and honestly, it's a little creepy how perfect it was. The more scientists studied it, the more questions they had about its species, about how it got so well preserved, about what else might be hiding under the ice just as intact. In the Siberian permafrost, scientists found 2 cave lion cubs so well preserved they didn't really look ancient, they looked recent. But these weren't house cats. They were baby versions of Panthera spile, aka the Eurasian cave lion. These things were massive, possibly larger than modern lions, and built for brute power. They hunted mammoths, they hunted bison, they hunted each other. One study found bones of a cave lion that had been gnawed on by another cave lion. The 2 frozen cubs, dubbed Sparta and Boris, are estimated to be around 30,000 years old, and scientists still don't know how they died exactly, but they're so well preserved, they're actually talking of cloning. The thing is, nobody's sure what kind of animal behavior you'd get out of these things if you actually defrosted them. Their instincts are 30,000 years old and hardwired for a world we don't live in anymore. So what could possibly go wrong there? In 2015, researchers in Siberia discovered a frozen woolly rhino calf that had been locked in ice for over 34,000 years. Its name is Sasha, and it's the only baby woolly rhino ever found. And it's not just bones, this thing still had skin, hair, a stubby little horn, even muscle tissue. But don't let the baby part fool you, woolly rhinos were absolute tanks. Adults could weigh over 2 tons, with horns up to 3 feet long, and you'd think for their size that they'd be slow too, but fossil evidence shows they could charge like a freight train, and they likely had tempers to match. These animals were built for war against the cold, against predators, and sometimes even against each other. Ancient cave art shows humans were just terrified of these things, often drawing them mid-charge or goring other animals, or again locked in battle with each other. If anyone's thinking of cloning a few of these things, they better make sure the fencing is just really strong. You can't see them with the naked eye, but Deloid rotifers are kind of freaky. These tiny aquatic creatures were found frozen in the Siberian permafrost, buried 11 feet deep and at least 24,000 years old. Scientists thawed them out and they started moving. So after 2.5 ice ages, they just woke up. They also cloned themselves. Deloid rotifers reproduce through parthenogenesis, which means they've got no no need for males. They can just endlessly self-copy, and they don't just survive cold. They can endure radiation, starvation, dehydration, even the vacuum of space. Their bodies will just shut down but stay preserved, and then when conditions are right, they kind of reboot. Now, scientists are wondering how long they can actually last and how many more are still down there dormant, waiting. In the icy ground of Siberia, scientists have dug up baby mammoths so perfectly preserved they still have eyelashes. One of the most famous is Lyuba, found in 2007 by a reindeer herder. She's around 42,000 years old, but she still has skin, fur, internal organs. Even the milk from her mother is still inside her stomach. Another calf, Yuka, was found with strange cut marks on her bones, like something or someone had been trying to carve her up. Could have been ancient human butchering, attacks from other predators, but the truth is nobody knows exactly what happened. Every time one of these calves gets pulled from the permafrost, though, it cranks up the conversation about cloning, but even if they could bring one of these things back, should they? Once again, in Siberia and Alaska, scientists have found ancient bison that are so well preserved they still had red in their veins. One of the best examples was discovered in 1979, a frozen bison they named Blue Babe because of this bluish tint from the minerals in the soil. The thing had muscle, skin, even visible wounds. It had clearly been killed by something, and then it froze before it could rot. But here's something pretty cool. These mummified bison showed signs of being stalked and eaten by predators that do not exist anymore. Deep claw marks, crushed vertebrae, and punctures that match the bite force of predators that have been extinct for a very, very long time. And scientists haven't just found one, there are multiple ancient bison mummies turning up as the permafrost melts, and each one paints a clear picture of this brutal predatory world buried under the ice. They're also keeping samples for cloning research potentially, so if you ever wanted to see a prehistoric beast brought back from the dead, they are kind of working on it. In Yukon, Canada, buried in the permafrost, scientists uncovered the frozen remains of Ice Age horses that once galloped across the tundra in massive herds. Obviously, they weren't like today's horses. They were stockier, hairier, adapted to survive in some of the harshest conditions Earth has ever seen. One foal, perfectly preserved, was found in a gold mine in 2018, still covered in reddish-brown fur, hooves, eyelashes, even its stomach contents intact. It was over 40,000 years old, but looked more like it had just lain down for a nap. The species, Aquis lambe, went extinct thousands of years ago, but DNA from these frozen animals are so well preserved sometimes, scientists are seriously considering using it for cloning. The idea is to bring them back, and not just as a curiosity, but possibly to repopulate the tundra with them to help slow permafrost melt. Because right now it's melting faster than ever, and we're seeing more and more pieces of an ecosystem that hasn't seen sunlight in tens of thousands of years, and not everything coming out of the ice is dead. In 2014, scientists digging through 30,000-year-old permafrost in Siberia found something that was very much not extinct, a virus, a massive one. So big you could see it under a regular microscope. They called it Pithovirus sibericum, and it's part of a terrifying new category, giant viruses. Two words you just don't want to hear right beside each other. Well, this ancient giant virus actually reanimated after being frozen for tens of thousands of years, and more of these ancient viruses have been found since, buried in melting ice, all still capable of waking up and infecting hosts. The one they revived didn't target humans, just amoebas, thankfully. But that's the part that makes researchers nervous. If some ancient virus can survive that long, what else is waiting to thaw? And are we even remotely prepared for it? Because you can quarantine, a lion, you can contain a mammoth, but a virus you've never dealt with before? Good luck. In Canada's Yukon Territory, scientists came across bones and fragments of an animal that sounds made up: giant Ice Age camels. Yes, camels in the snow. Kind of a bizarre image. Not the two-humped animals we know today, obviously. They were massive and built to survive brutal cold, not scorching heat. They had long legs, thick fat stores, and bones tougher than steel. Fossils of these ancient camels were found in gold mines near Dawson City, preserved in permafrost so well, researchers were able to extract collagen from their bones, something that usually doesn't survive past a few thousand years. These camels would have roamed the same icy landscape as mammoths, dire wolves, and saber-toothed cats. Some estimates say they stood over 9 feet tall, and while they might not look terrifying at first glance, just their sheer size, the power, the fact that they existed in this totally different version of North America, it makes them feel more like monsters than mammals. Scientists still don't completely understand how they adapted to such extreme environments or how they disappeared, but see one of the most well-preserved dinosaur fossils ever discovered, learn about the 200-million-year-old dinosaur that was dug up from Antarctic ice, and a 20,000-year-old woolly rhino encased in Siberian permafrost. These are even more prehistoric creatures scientists found frozen in ice. In March of 2011, Sean Funk, a shovel operator at a mine in Fort McMurray, Alberta, was digging when he made an amazing discovery. A discovery that turned out to be Alberta's oldest dinosaur fossil and one of the best preserved ever found in the entire world. Honestly, this has to be the most amazing dinosaur discovery that I've ever read about. And I think Don Henderson, curator of dinosaurs at the Royal Tyrrell Museum, agrees, saying at the time, "Right away we knew it was going to be something good, but we had no idea how good it was going to be." So after getting the fossil back to the museum, Don and his team got to work, and 6 years later the dinosaur was named Borealopelta markmichelli. The name Borealopelta means shield of the north, and the species name honors Mark Mitchell, the museum technician who spent over 7,000 grueling hours removing the dinosaur from rock. Now, I'm not done with this one. There's just too much to talk about with this discovery to cram it into one point. So as I said, the Borealopelta was incredibly well preserved. It was covered in thick armor, especially around its neck. It also had these massive 20-inch spikes at the shoulders that were assumed to be for fighting, but Victoria Arbour, a curator of paleontology, also thought they might have been a display of health and strength, similar to the horns of a bull or tusks of an elephant. Now here's what's utterly crazy to me though. This dinosaur was so intact, they were able to see what was in its stomach. There were twigs and ferns in there, suggesting it ate during the wet season. Scientists think it could have been swept away by a flash flood, eventually sinking to the bottom of the sea. The body would have flipped over and sank, with its thick back and bloated belly causing it to be preserved in sediment, creating a natural time capsule that kept it safe for 110 million years. Here's another crazy thing about this find though. They were even able to determine, to a certain degree, what color the creature was. Most of the fossil was covered in relatively well-preserved skin, and from this they were able to study pigment cells called melanosomes. Melanosomes are seen in nature all the time. It's what gives many modern-day animals unique markings like spots and stripes. It's rare to see melanosomes in fossils, but again, Borealopelta was especially well preserved. At least one component of Borealopelta's color was this reddish-brown, said Caleb Brown from the Royal Tyrrell Museum. The color on its back may have been part of a camouflage pattern called countershading, helping it blend into its environment and avoid predators. Now also in 2011, a team of paleontologists led by William Hammer discovered a new species of ancient dinosaur in the frozen mountains of Antarctica, an area that's usually thought of as one of the coldest places on Earth, but of course millions of years ago it was much warmer. The dinosaur was small, around 4 to 5 feet long, and had bird-like hip bones. It was likely related to early plant eaters like the Ferbosaur and Heterodontosaur, which were the ancestors of larger and more famous dinos like Stegosaurus and Ankylosaurus. The fossils were found on Mount Kirkpatrick, part of the Central Transatlantic Mountains. Hammer and his team uncovered a leg and foot, but they weren't sure if they had found the dinosaur's head. It would take about a year to fully understand what they'd found. Thomas Holtz, a geology professor at the University of Maryland, noted that the find could help fill gaps in both dinosaur evolution and the ancient Antarctic environment, saying that this discovery was from a time when dinosaurs were just starting to take over, comparing these early small plant eaters to rabbits, fast, common and without armor, but important to the overall evolution of the giant plant eaters that came later. Finding fossils in Antarctica is extremely challenging because of the harsh conditions and short research window. Hammer had been trying to return to the site since 1990, but bad weather and helicopter problems cut short his 2003 trip. As Holtz put it, anytime we find fossils there, it's a brand new species. It's practically unexplored territory. So these weren't the only dino remains William Hammer discovered in the mountains of Antarctica. In 1990, he and his team discovered a 22-foot meat-eating dinosaur called Cryolophosaurus. This was a big deal because it was the first dinosaur ever found in Antarctica. Cryolophosaurus was a meat-eating dinosaur that lived around 190 million years ago during the early Jurassic period. It was about 20 to 23 feet long, 6 to 7 meters, and weighed roughly 1,000 pounds. What really sets this dinosaur apart was its unique crest. The crest, found on the top of its head, had a very unusual shape, kind of like a frozen backwards mohawk. There are like two kind of things here. It's believed that the crest could have been used for display, either to attract mates or to communicate with other members of its species. As Hammer put it, it looked like a frozen crested reptile, which is how they got the name Cryolophosaurus, meaning frozen crested lizard. And again, in the early 1990s, William Hammer of Augustana College discovered more incredible fossils on Mount Kirkpatrick. These particular fossils included parts of a foot, leg, and ankle bones from a long-necked dinosaur that lived around 190 million years ago. It wasn't until much later, though, that the fossil was identified. The fossils were painstakingly removed from the ice and rock using jackhammers, rock saws, and chisels under extremely difficult conditions, said Nathan Smith, a graduate student at the Field Museum in Chicago. After a lot of hard work, Smith and paleontologist Diego Pohl realized they'd found a new species of dinosaur, which they named Glacialosaurus hammeri. This dinosaur was about 20 to 25 feet long and would have weighed between 4 to 6 tons. It belonged to a group called sauropodomorphs, which includes some of the largest dinosaurs ever. Think of those massive-sized, long-necked plant eaters. Around 20,000 years ago, a young woolly rhinoceros was going about its day in what's now northern Siberia. It was probably foraging for food when it made an oopsie and drowned in a river. Fast forward to 2020, and that same woolly rhino became a huge discovery for scientists. As rising temperatures cause permafrost to melt, creatures like this long extinct rhino are being uncovered, giving researchers a glimpse into prehistoric times. Permafrost is a layer of soil that's been frozen for thousands of years, great for preserving ancient remains. The woolly rhino's carcass was found by a local farmer in Yakutia, Siberia, about 15,000 years after the species went extinct. The fossil was incredibly well preserved, with its fur, hooves, and internal organs still intact. But what made this discovery even more special was the rhino's horn, which is rarely found in such good condition because cartilage usually decomposes relatively quickly. In 2018, a local man named Pavel Efimov made an incredible discovery in Siberia: the severed head of a giant wolf, perfectly preserved beneath the permafrost. But this wolf was nearly 40,000 years old. It wasn't until 2019 that researchers started studying it in detail. The big question they were trying to answer was whether the wolf's head had been chopped off by humans or separated by ice. The cut on the wolf's neck wasn't what you'd expect from ice separation. It was rougher, less smooth, meaning it might have been made by something like a tool. The severed head is quite large, measuring about 40 centimeters, much bigger than the typical 25 centimeter head of a modern Siberian wolf. It had a thick mammoth-like coat, sharp fangs, and some parts of its skull seemed more developed than today's wolves. In 2016, ornithologist Stephen Emsley made a surprising find during a research trip in Antarctica. He stumbled on ancient penguin remains at Cape Urzar near the Ross Sea, and what he discovered there was unlike anything he'd seen before. Now, at first, Emsley was researching ancient penguin remains at the site, following a lead about penguin droppings. He didn't expect to find much, since explorers like Robert Falcon Scott and Ernest Shackleton hadn't recorded any many penguin sightings in the area, but when Emsley arrived, he found something unexpected: white splotchy guano stains and loose chick bones, which usually indicate that a penguin colony had recently occupied the site, but that wasn't the case. Investigating further, he found complete penguin chick carcasses and even intact mummies. The site must have been covered by snow and ice soon after the colony was last abandoned, preserving the surface remains for centuries. Emsley went on to write, "The site had been used by penguins at different times in the past, with carbon dating showing it was occupied 3 times starting around 5,000 years ago. The site's location and the penguins' repeated visits were likely because of changing ice conditions, which would open and close the coast to the penguins." Emsley believes that this area could potentially see penguins returning in the future as climate change melts the sea ice earlier each summer, giving them access to the coast again. In 2018, some fossil ivory hunters in northeastern Siberia made a pretty cool discovery. While digging into the permafrost, they unearthed the carcass of a bird, but this bird was a 46,000-year-old specimen, perfectly frozen in time. The discovery was sent to paleontologist Love Dallin and a team of researchers at the Swedish Museum of Natural History. The bird is believed to be an ancestor of the horned lark, which is found in places like northern Russia and Mongolia today. It's a cool find though, the first bird of its kind ever to be discovered. The fact that the bird was almost completely intact made it one of the best preserved ancient animals ever found. The bird was found near Balaya Gora, a village in Yakutia, an area known as the Pole of Cold because of its extremely cold winters, sometimes reaching as low as -60 degrees Fahrenheit, which is roughly -50 degrees Celsius. That is just too cold. The researchers think that the end of the last ice age led to the formation of a new subspecies of animals like this bird. The discovery adds to a list of well-preserved creatures found in the same area, like a 42,000-year-old foal and an 18,000-year-old puppy, both of which I've talked about in previous videos.
Number 10. Dinosaur. When it comes to big things, dinosaurs were pretty damn big. Scientists were able to uncover the fossilized remains of a new and unknown species of dinosaur underneath the ice sheets in Greenland. When the dinosaurs were alive, the Earth was a lot warmer and more tropical, these fossils becoming trapped under the ice when the climate changed into the Ice Age. The skull they found is thought to be a 2-legged plant-eating dinosaur of medium size, and they dubbed the new species Issy-Sinik. The dinosaur is believed to have grown to the size of 10 to 30 feet, and the skull they found is thought to be that of a younger dinosaur that had not fully grown yet. They used computer technology to create 3D scans of the head before sending the specimens to the Natural History Museum in Denmark, as they have sovereignty over the country of Greenland. It is the first known dinosaur to have been native to Greenland and is thought to come from the late Triassic period around 200 million years ago. Number 9. Bison. The massive carcass of a bison known as a steppe bison was found by a gold mining family in Alaska way back in 1979. They were using a mining hose and were melting a frozen block of ice, effectively thawing out the creature that had become trapped inside. The bison species is from the Ice Age, and the body that they found is thought to be tens of thousands of years old. Once they were finally able to fully excavate the body, they found other things alongside it, including hair, insects, wood, and different plants. When the pelt of the animal reacted to the soil around it, it turned the body blue, and so the bison ended up being dubbed Blue Babe. Analysis of the body showed it had died 36,000 years ago, a result of being attacked by an Ice Age lion. The ice allowed the creature to be incredibly well preserved, scientists even being able to find pockets of blood in the body. Number 8. Cave bear. This specimen found on an island in the Arctic was a very unique discovery, said to be one of the first of its kind. Researchers found a well-preserved body of a cave bear that was around 40,000 years old. Cave bears would grow to be around 7 feet long and typically weighed over 1,000 pounds in their adulthood. Before this discovery was made, they only knew about the animal from skulls and bones, and had never found a specimen that was this fully preserved. The body that they found had all of its organs still, and even still had its nose on its face, paired with its terrifyingly massive sharp teeth. According to one of Russia's leading Ice Age experts, the discovery of the body was of world importance and is the first and only find of its kind. The body was found by a group of reindeer herders on the island and was then sent around to various scientists to study the life of the animal. Number 7. Horned lark. Alright, some of these creatures aren't that big, but they're still pretty interesting, and size doesn't matter anyways. In 2018, fossil hunters were in the northeastern part of Siberia known as the Pole of Cold, and they were tunneling into the permafrost. Deep underground, they discovered the body of a bird thought to be around 46,000 years old, but it was incredibly well preserved, and scientists say that it looks like it could have only died a few days ago. Researchers believe that it is the ancestor of the horned lark bird and is the first of its kind to have ever been discovered. It is also said to be one of the best preserved specimens ever discovered, as it was almost completely intact and still had all of its parts. The ice age that took place is thought to have generated many new species who adapted, and this is one of them. Siberia is home to a lot of frozen discoveries due to its freezing cold temperatures, and who knows what else is sitting in the ice, just waiting to be found. Number 6. Wolf. The Pleistocene era, or Ice Age, lasted from about 2 million to 11,000 years ago, and many great extinct creatures we've discovered come from this era. One of these discoveries was the head of a massive Ice Age era wolf that was still snarling 40,000 years after it had died. It was found in a cold region of Russia and is one of the first full-sized frozen wolves ever to be discovered. They found it in the summer of 2018, and it was described as having mammoth-like fur, sharp fangs, and was between the ages of 2 and 4 when it passed away. Because only the head was discovered, it only gave small clues towards the evolution of wolves and how they have changed and adapted over the years, but researchers were still able to reconstruct the head using 3D models and get a solid understanding of what these Ice Age wolves looked like. In fact, the specimen was so well preserved that it even still had parts of its brain. Number 5. Lion cubs. As I've mentioned before, Siberia is a place that is fairly popular for finding frozen specimens, and this time they didn't just find one animal, but instead 2 matching ones. They found 2 mummified cave lions that lived during the Ice Age around 30,000 years ago, giving them the names Sparta and Boris. They were found in 2017 and 2018 by mammoth tusk collectors, and one of the cubs was believed at the time to be the best preserved Ice Age animal ever found. It was originally thought that the 2 cubs they discovered were siblings, being only a few months old at the time of their death, but research showed that Boris had actually died about 15,000 years before Sparta. Sparta still had her fur, teeth, skin, organs, and even her whiskers, looking like she may have only recently died despite being a part of a species that went extinct over 10,000 years ago. If given the chance to grow up, the cubs would have managed to grow to 5 feet long and weigh almost 1,000 pounds. Number 4. Sharks. Creatures that are found frozen in ice don't always actually come from the Ice Age. There are plenty of cold places right now where animals can unfortunately become trapped, or pass away and then freeze. In Cape Cod, Massachusetts, it has become startlingly common for giant sharks to become frozen in the ice off the coast. A few years ago, they found a total of 4 different sharks that had all become frozen in the ice and passed away. The sharks were apparently becoming trapped in shallow waters during changing weather conditions, and sudden cold snaps would cause them to freeze and die. The thresher sharks that were commonly becoming trapped were apparently not a very well-studied species, so the bodies that were found were taken and thawed in order to be dissected and researched. The Atlantic White Shark Conservancy even went so far to refer to the specimens as sharksicles, but probably not something you'd want to eat on a hot day in the summer. Number 3. Mummies. Human remains are usually found when archaeologists dig up large graves and find skeletons, but in a rare case they manage to find the well-preserved and mummified body of a woman. A group of hikers exploring an Argentinian volcano found the body of a woman who appeared to have died around 500 years ago. The body was well preserved due to the incredibly high and cold elevation at which it was found. It's believed that the body was there as part of an ancient sacrificial ritual, ritual, and the woman, named the Inca Ice Maiden, was sacrificed. She was given lots of food and drink before being led up the volcano, where she was left to die of exposure. The discovery of her body was also incredibly important because from samples they took, they were able to discover that she was fighting tuberculosis, and these sorts of samples can help us work towards fighting these diseases in the modern day. Number 2. Foal. In the summer of 2018, they found what they called the best preserved Ice Age animal ever found. Feels like they say that a lot. Anyways, mammoth tusk hunters in Siberia found the body of an around 42,000-year-old horse foal, incredibly well preserved thanks to the cold temperatures. They say that it was only about 2 weeks old at the time of its death, and they were able to extract both blood and urine samples from it. The discovery apparently pushed scientists closer to the hope that they could bring these extinct creatures like mammoths back to life. I think we should listen to Jurassic Park's warnings and just deal with the animals we actually have right now. I know you might be thinking that a baby horse isn't some terrifying giant ice age creature, but full-grown horses are pretty big, okay, and they're actually kind of terrifying. I mean, they basically walk on one giant finger. It's creepy and I don't like it. Number 1. Baby mammoth. During the Ice Age, mammoths were one of the biggest creatures around, basically being massive furry elephants. This young woolly mammoth specimen was found in, you guessed it, Siberia. This incredibly well-preserved body of a young female woolly mammoth named Yucca is said to have lived around 28,000 years ago, and they were discovered around a decade ago. Due to her good condition, scientists were eager to conduct experiments, and one of those was taking cells from her body. When they put the cells together, they found that they were still active, even almost 30,000 years later, so they managed to technically revive Yucca in a way. At full size, woolly mammoths were usually around 13 feet tall and would weigh around 13,000 pounds, or the same as around 26,000 large oranges, if that helps you picture it.
Giant beavers, dinosaurs, mammoths, and hyenas, these are more prehistoric creatures scientists found frozen in ice. Here's something you probably wouldn't be expecting to see on this list: ancient camels. Believe it or not, camels actually first appeared in North America more than 40 million years ago. Over time they split into two main groups, the camels we know today and the relatives, llamas and alpacas. The camels made their way across the Bering Land Bridge, while llamas and alpacas moved south. But there was another species, the Camelops hasturnus, which stuck around in North America until the Ice Age. Some of these camels roamed as far south as Honduras, while others made it all the way to Alaska and the Yukon. In 2008, gold miners in Alaska discovered some Ice Age bones, which turned out to belong to this extinct camel species. The bones were so well preserved in the cold that researchers managed to extract DNA. Imagine a 6-foot-long beaver weighing 220 pounds. Ice Age giant beavers had 6-inch long front teeth. They would have looked like fierce predators, but they didn't eat meat. This massive rodent was about the size of a black bear and had a tail that resembled a muskrat's rather than today's typical beaver tail. A 2019 study looked at fossils from the Yukon and Ohio dating back 10,000 to 50,000 years and revealed that the giant beaver's diet consisted mostly of aquatic plants. Tessa Plint, a researcher with Heriot-Watt University, explained that by studying the chemical makeup of fossilized bones and teeth, scientists can figure out what an animal ate even tens of thousands of years later. Understanding the diet of these ancient animals helps them learn more about how climate change affected them. As the earth warmed and dried, the giant beaver couldn't compete with smaller, more adaptable beavers that survived. In 2010, a team of Russian scientists found a well-preserved mammoth in Siberia, later named Yucca. She was a young mammoth, about 6 to 8 years old, and she lived around 39,000 years ago. Yucca's body was in really good shape. Its body measured about 2.5 meters long, and it was remarkably intact, with her trunk, bones, some of her flesh, hair, and eyes still preserved, making her one of the most well-preserved mammoth specimens ever found. Pretty incredible to see. I haven't seen it in person, but based on pictures and video that I've seen of it, it's crazy how well preserved it is. They think she might have fallen into a mud pit or drowned, which helped preserve her so well. People probably butchered her for meat, too, as there were cut marks on her bones. In 2002, an amazing discovery was made in northern Siberia. The remains of a woolly mammoth were found frozen in the permafrost near the Siberian village of Yukagir. The specimen which was an adult male, turned out to be in remarkable condition. This mammoth's head, still covered in skin, was so well preserved that it looked almost fresh. When polar explorer Bernard Bouygues heard about the find, he led a team to retrieve the mammoth's remains. The team made 3 trips to the site, carefully gathering pieces of the mammoth's body and putting them together. It gave scientists a ton of information about woolly mammoths. For example, they discovered that the mammoth had temporal glands between its eyes and ears. These glands would have helped regulate body temperature. The mammoth's feet were also a key find. The soles had deep cracks in it, which would have helped the animal grip icy surfaces while walking. The specimen also included the tusks, front legs, and even parts of the stomach and intestines. Based on the size of its bones and tusks, scientists estimated that this mammoth was over 9 feet tall at the shoulder and weighed around 4 to 5 tons. Scimitar cats, or Homotheriums, were fierce prehistoric predators. Their fossils are rare. Because of this, scientists used to think that they were part of a small population. That changed in 2011 when a bone was found in permafrost at a mining site near Dawson City in Canada. This bone belonged to a scimitar cat, not a saber-toothed cat, which are often confused with scimitar cats. Scimitar cats had shorter, curved teeth that were serrated, unlike the long, flat teeth of saber-tooths. What made this find even more exciting was how well preserved the bone was in the ice. Researchers at the University of Copenhagen were able to sequence the entire genome from this bone. Their genetic makeup hints towards a scimitar-toothed cats as being highly skilled hunters, said Michael Westbury, an evolutionary genomicist at the University of Copenhagen, going on to say they, quote, likely had very good daytime vision and displayed complex social behaviors, end quote. These cats also had adaptations for endurance. Their bones and cardiovascular systems were strong. They were built for long-distance running, and based on this, researchers believe scimitar cats hunted in packs, wearing down their prey during the day. Scientists estimated the specimen was over 47,500 years old. Scimitar cats likely went extinct around 10,000 years ago, along with many of the animals that they hunted, like mammoths and woolly rhinos. Most people think of hyenas as the scavengers of Africa, but the ancient Arctic also had its share of these creatures as well. These ancient hyenas lived over 5 million years ago, and its remains have been found around the world, from Mongolia to Kansas to Mexico. In 2019, evolutionary biologist Jack Sang analyzed a pair of fossilized hyena teeth from the Yukon. He quickly identified them as belonging to a species that once roamed the ancient Arctic. These teeth likely belonged to a hyena that lived around 850,000 to 1.4 million years ago. This hyena was equipped with teeth perfect for crushing bones, probably feeding on ancient caribou, bison, and maybe even baby mammoths. Eventually, these hyenas disappeared, and researchers think they were outcompeted by other Ice Age predators like the short-faced bear or bone-crushing dog. Never heard of those before till today. What an awesome name. In 2018, miners working at Hester Creek in the Yukon discovered a mummified squirrel, perfectly preserved from around 30,000 years before. At first, this lump of fur, claws, and limbs didn't look like much, but scientists examined it more and realized that they'd found an Arctic ground squirrel that had died during hibernation. Researchers nicknamed the squirrel Hester after the area where it was discovered, and it's amazing to think that this little guy was running around the Yukon several thousand years ago, said museum representatives. When the mummified squirrel was first found, its exact identity wasn't clear until the team noticed little hands, claws, and a tail. Grant Zazula, a paleontologist from the Yukon government, was part of the team that studied the squirrel, saying, "It's not quite recognizable until you see those little hands and these claws, and you see a little tail, and then you see ears." The team figured that Hester was likely hibernating when it died. Arctic ground squirrels curl up into balls like this, one when they hibernate in underground dens, often lined with nests made of leaves. These nests are usually found empty, so finding one with an actual squirrel inside was pretty cool. To avoid damaging the specimen, they decided not to unravel the ball of fur. Instead, they had it x-rayed by a local veterinarian who'd expected the bones to be in pretty bad condition, but when the x-ray results came in, the squirrel's skeleton was actually in great condition, and it looks nearly identical to a modern Arctic ground squirrel. In 2021, scientists discovered a tiny microscopic creature that had been frozen in Siberian permafrost for over 24,000 years. The team found it buried 11.5 feet deep. The little animal was what's called a paraboloid rotifer, and despite being frozen solid for thousands of years, it actually came back to life, and on top of that, it was still able to reproduce. Rotifers are tough little creatures. They typically live in freshwater or moist soil and are known for surviving in extreme conditions like radiation, dehydration, low oxygen, and freezing temperatures. To confirm its age, scientists radiocarbon dated the soil surrounding the critter. Stas Malaven, a co-author of the study, couldn't believe it, saying, "We revived animals that saw woolly mammoths," which is quite impressive. I agree. Next on the list we have Sanek. In 2021, there was a pretty amazing discovery in Greenland, a new dinosaur. New in that we didn't know it existed, not a living dinosaur, sadly. Researchers identified a previously unknown dinosaur species based on well-preserved skulls. This newfound species was named Isi Sanek, meaning cold bone in Greenlandic Inuit. The remains of this creature date back to the late Triassic period, about 214 million years ago. The skulls were first found in 1994, and at the time they were believed to belong to a Plateosaurus, but recent advancements in research techniques, including micro-CT scans, showed that these skulls actually belonged to a different dino altogether, a dinosaur that was different from any known species. To visualize the full form of the skulls, researchers used digital modeling after the micro-CT scans. These were bipedal herbivores, medium-sized, and shared a lot of similarities with sauropods. Those are those long-necked, giraffe-looking dinosaurs you probably remember from Jurassic Park. But the Isi Sanek would have been a lot smaller than them. They're pretty cool-looking dinosaurs, almost like a sauropod mixed with a velociraptor, at least to me. In 2016, scientists discovered a 12,400-year-old mummified puppy. This puppy was discovered in the permafrost along a river in Siberia. Researchers believe the puppy died in a landslide and its body became preserved in the ice. Its fur was intact, and the body, from its nose to its tail, was almost completely preserved. The only part that wasn't in perfect condition was the brain, which had started to decompose, but even still, about 70 to 80% of the brain was still intact. This puppy is one of the few animals in the Pleistocene era which has a well-preserved brain. While there have been other dog fossils found from the same time period, they were too decomposed to study. The puppy's condition is especially special because its brain could help researchers learn more about ancient animals. In fact, they were saying at the time that they could potentially use the DNA and tissues from this puppy to bring it back to life, which would have been nuts. Along with the frozen puppy, human tools were found near the site, meaning that this dog was domesticated and owned. From newly discovered species to a mysterious creature so large it was dubbed the Antarctic Godzilla. Colossal squids, out-of-place animals, and alien megastructures. Just what is going on in the South Pole? These are giant creatures found in Antarctica that have yet to be explained. The Cabagon. On April 28th of 1974, off the coast of Littleton, New Zealand, a Japanese fishing vessel, the 28th Kamparamaru, was out doing its thing, but this day would be unlike any other. At around 7 p.m., all 28 crew members, including Captain Kimura, spotted something massive in the water. Whatever it was, had a head that stuck out of the water, and even though they could only see the top of whatever this beast was, they could tell it was an absolute monster. The head alone was about 1.5 meters tall. The creature had these giant, spooky eyes on top, and some crew members thought they saw what looked like a second set of eyes, or maybe nostrils, right beneath. The texture was described as either rough and hairy or scaled with spikes. It was a bit like a gigantic spider head mixed with a sea monster. Captain Kimura even sketched the thing, and it later made headlines in the New Zealand Weekly magazine. Nearby, mysterious footprints were found on the beach. This beastie was soon linked to other cryptids in Japanese waters like the giant sea ghost, Umebazu, and the Antarctic Godzilla. More on him in a bit. But the Cabagon has to be one of the strangest sea cryptids ever reported. The colossal squid is believed to be the largest squid in terms of sheer mass. We're talking about a creature that can grow up to 39 to 46 feet long, and it's not just long, it's also built like a tank, unlike its more famous cousin, the giant squid, which are pretty incredible already. The colossal squid actually has hooks on its tentacles though, some swiveling, others there's 3 pointed, and those hooks are sharp, designed to hold on to prey with this grip-like vice. The colossal squid's beak is the largest of any known squid, bigger than that of the giant squid, and its eyes are the biggest in the animal kingdom, with one specimen having eyes about 11 inches across. These creatures weren't found to actually exist until 1925, when 2 of its tentacles were found in a sperm whale's stomach. Sightings go way back though, but they were thought of the same way creatures like Nessie are, legends and myths. In 1802, a massive squid was spotted in Tasmania, way before anyone officially recognized the giant squid. Then in 1870, a huge squid carcass washed ashore in New Zealand, with locals calling it a tanewa. More sightings and washed up squid parts continued to pop up in the following decades. By 1924, just a year before the colossal squid was officially identified, another giant squid was spotted near Bluff, New Zealand. We know these colossal squids exist now, but we've never retrieved any massive sized carcasses, just ones on the smaller end of the scale. But somewhere deep in the waters off the coast of Antarctica, there are gargantuan squids, possibly even bigger than our current estimates. The large Antarctic sea mammal, also known as the Antarctic Godzilla. So the story goes that on February 13th of 1958, the Japanese research vessel Soya Nihongo was cruising through Antarctica's icy waters when around 7 p.m. the crew spotted something massive in Lutzow Bay. This thing was giant. The captain of the ship would go on to dub the creature the Antarctic Godzilla because to him it looked a lot like Godzilla. Now, I love my giant monster movies, Mothra, Gigan, the whole gang. Not the type of movie characters I'd like to encounter in real life though. If I found out the Ninja Turtles were chilling in the sewers below Manhattan, that would be a great day for me. A real life Godzilla rising from the water to wreak havoc on the Japanese public wouldn't be a boring news day, but not good. There's not a ton of info on this case. The sighting was brief, and the creature disappeared before anyone could get a clear look or photo, but the nickname stuck, and some say this creature could have been the same as the Kamagon that I spoke about earlier. The notorious bloop recording. We've all heard of this, but if you're thinking it can all be explained away as glacial ice, think again, there could be more to it than that. For those not in the know, the bloop was an eerie, unexplained sound that was recorded in 1997. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration picked up a powerful underwater noise in the South Pacific. This sound was incredibly low frequency and very loud. The mysterious sound was dubbed the bloop, and nobody knew what it was. Some thought it might be from a massive undiscovered sea creature. But in 2012, the NOAA figured that the bloop was actually just similar to noises made by shifting ice. The bloop was detected several times by an array of hydrophones designed to listen for undersea activity. The NOAA concluded that the sound matched patterns produced by ice quakes rather than some giant sea creature, but till this day not everyone is convinced. Some argue that the bloop's sound patterns are just too specific, pointing to it coming from some yet to be discovered animal. Are there walruses in the southern hemisphere? Well, not officially anyway, but there have been some very odd sightings over the years. Sightings of what have been dubbed southern walruses. Victorian naturalist James Hector, who was no stranger to odd animal reports, collected stories about walrus-like creatures spotted around New Zealand. Hector even speculated that these creatures might be lurking among the Antarctic ice flows. He thought if these areas were explored more extensively, they might uncover these walruses as well as other unknown animals. Thor Heyerdahl, the famous explorer, also had thoughts on this, saying that a Maori myth about a tusked merman might have actually been based on sightings of these mysterious southern hemisphere walruses. And there are other mentions of tusked creatures in the region. Historical records mention tusked marine mammals off South Africa. In Francois Legat's Voyage and Adventures from 1707, Legat described seeing a large red sea cow with long tusks off the Cape of Good Hope. Then in 1852, we have Hugh de Bonnelly's sighting off Isla San Lorenzo in Peru. He saw a giant tusked seal, described as having a seal-like head with two huge white tusks. With all these strange sightings and historical records, could there really be something out there lurking in the icy depths that we still don't fully understand? But walruses aren't the only out-of-place animals reported to show up in the southern hemisphere. Narwhals have as well. Back in 1615, Dutch explorer Willem Schouten had a close encounter when his ship was attacked by an unknown beast. The next day, they found a horn lodged in the ship about a foot long. Then in 1785, a French general reported seeing two dark porpoise-like animals south of Africa. He described them having a horn about 1.5 feet long and noted a high fin, which is odd since narwhals usually have a bony ridge. In 1892, the ship Baleina spotted a narwhal near the Bransfield Strait, pretty close to Antarctica. And these were experienced whalers who all said what they saw was definitely a narwhal, or at least looked a hell of a lot like one. In recent years, Antarctica has been the focus of some pretty wild conspiracy theories, one of which is that there are secret government facilities dedicated to the study of aliens and their technology. The remote and inhospitable climate of Antarctica would make for an ideal cover for secretive activities, and some conspiracy theorists point to satellite images and unusual geological formations in Antarctica as evidence of possible hidden alien bases. Some believe that there are massive pyramid-type structures buried under the ice that may have been built by some ancient civilization, possibly with the help of aliens, or just built by aliens themselves who once inhabited the Earth, setting up bases in the South Pole. The governments of the world are rumored to have secret research facilities in Antarctica to study alien technology. Some even claim that these facilities have made contact with extraterrestrial beings. It's very hard to believe, but I'd like to think so. The Ningen is another more modern legend that's caught quite a bit of attention online in the last couple decades. Ningen, which means human in Japanese, is a creature supposedly lurking in the sub-Antarctic oceans. There are two main ways people describe the Ningen. The first is a massive whale-like creature with a humanoid face and giant limbs, said to be around 65 to 100 feet long. The second description is a lot less common, a smaller land-dwelling creature with a big head and humanoid legs. It's said to be pale blue with a big slit mouth and either small or gaping eyes. In 2007, there was a very interesting post made on the Japanese forum 2channel. According to the post, a whale research ship spotted this giant creature near their vessel off the Antarctic coast. The crew initially thought it was a submarine, but when they got closer, it vanished under the waves. Then in 2005, some folks claimed Google Earth caught a glimpse of what they thought was a Ningen in the Southern Ocean. Skeptics argued it was just an iceberg that sorta looked like a sea monster, but then there's the 2010 Enoshima Aquarium incident. The aquarium had posted a video to YouTube with footage of the deep ocean, and towards the end, several viewers spotted what looked like this eerie thing. It almost looked like a creature with a big smiling mouth and little eyes. A lot of commenters said it looked a lot like depictions of the Ningen. The aquarium later said it was just an unusual rock formation with sponges making up what looked like eyes, but some still find the footage undeniably creepy and even think there could be more to this video than the aquarium is letting on.
I think I found a dinosaur. Those were the words of Joe Davis. It's the largest and most complete skeleton of its kind ever found in the UK.
I looked down and just saw this series of ridges in the mud. Hang on, that looks different. There's something there that's different.
From near perfectly preserved mammoths to ancient cave lions and woolly rhinos, these are prehistoric creatures scientists found frozen in ice. In 2007 and 2008, two baby mammoths, later named Lyuba and Chroma, were found in Siberia. They were so well preserved that researchers were able to piece together how they died, even though both calves, one about 1 month old and the other 2 months old, died more than 40,000 years ago. Scientists used CT scans to find that the two mammoths probably choked on mud after falling into water. Daniel Fisher, a co-author of the study, stated the mud was like a really thick batter that they got clogged in their trachea and they were unable to dislodge by coughing. Basically preserved them from taking another breath. Lyuba and the 1-month-old calf was discovered by a reindeer herder. Chroma was found in 2008, frozen upright in permafrost. Scavengers had eaten parts of her heart, lungs, and skull. But both mummies still showed a neonatal line on their teeth, a marker of stress during birth, which helped scientists estimate their ages. CT scans of Lyuba showed signs of what's called a mammalian dive reflex, showing that she fell through the ice into a muddy lake where she tried to clear the mud from her airways but eventually suffocated. Chroma, who had a belly full of breast milk, also had mud in her trachea, but her death is a bit less cut and dry. But according to researchers, it's possible she fell into a river, broke her back, and was then buried in mud while trying to escape. In 2015, scientists in Siberia discovered a baby woolly rhino, perfectly preserved in a frozen riverbank. Nicknamed Sasha after the man who found it, the rhino calf is the most complete specimen of its kind ever discovered. Sasha lived around 10,000 years ago, was about 1.5 meters long, or almost 5 feet, and 0.8 meters high, about 2.6 feet, much smaller than the fully grown adults, which could reach up to 15 feet long. According to Albert Protopopov from the Yakutian Academy of Sciences, baby woolly rhinos are incredibly rare to find, so this was a pretty amazing discovery, especially because it helps researchers learn more about the early life of these animals, which they didn't really know much about before. Woolly rhinos went extinct around 10,000 years ago. Climate change and habitat loss likely led to their extinction, but some scientists also think overhunting may have been a part of it. Around 30,000 years ago in Siberia, a tiny cave lion cub was making its way across the tundra when a sudden mudslide or crack in the permafrost caused the cub to fall and get trapped. The cub was buried in ice, preserving her fur, skin, and organs in almost perfect condition. This poor cub, later named Sparta, was discovered by mammoth tusk hunters in 2017, poking out of the melting permafrost in Yakutia, Siberia. Sparta is probably the best preserved Ice Age animal ever found, said Lev Dallin, one of the study's co-authors, going on to say that even her whiskers were preserved. Sparta died about 28,000 years ago, and she was actually found alongside another cub named Boris, who was even older, dying around 43,000 years ago. Both cubs were about 1 to 2 months old when they died, with their sharp teeth just starting to emerge. Cave lions were closely related to modern African lions and lived across the northern hemisphere during the Ice Age. Unlike today's lions, though, these were, of course, adapted to freezing cold weather. In 2020, a perfectly preserved bear mummy was discovered in the Siberian permafrost. Siberia again. But anyway, it wasn't quite what scientists expected. At first, researchers thought they'd found the remains of a giant extinct cave bear, but eventually they realized the bear was much younger and from a completely different species. The bear was found by reindeer herders on a remote island in the East Siberian Sea. It was so well preserved that scientists could still see its skin, fur, claws, teeth, nose, internal organs, and even body fat. The remains were named the Etherican bear after a nearby river. At first, researchers at the Lazarev Mammoth Museum believed the bear was a cave bear, a massive species that went extinct about 22,000 years ago, but this bear was only about 3,460 years old. Turned out to be a young female brown bear standing just over 5 feet tall and weighing around 172 pounds. It was probably around 2 to 3 years old when it died. The bear's stomach contents revealed it had been eating plants and birds, with feathers still found inside its belly, which is incredible when you think about it. It also had signs of spinal injuries, which may have contributed to its death. In 2016, a gold miner in Yukon, Canada discovered something frozen in the ice. It turned out to be an ancient wolf pup, which had been almost perfectly preserved for 57,000 years. The mummified gray wolf, known as Zur, was found in the Klondike goldfields near Dawson City. Lead researcher Julie Machin, an anatomy professor, called it, quote, the most complete wolf specimen ever found from the Ice Age, going on to say all her soft tissue, her hair, her skin, even her little nose is still there. She's just complete, and that is really rare. Using radiocarbon dating and DNA analysis, scientists confirmed Zur died at just 7 weeks old. The remains were especially important because they were discovered in North America, unlike most finds in Siberia, as you've seen from this list, which are harder to access. Machen and her team were able to link Zur's DNA to both ancient Beringian wolves from Yukon and Russian grey wolves, which means that ancient wolves from North America and Eurasia mixed. Jurors' remains also showed them what Ice Age wolves ate. The assumption had always been that they mostly ate bison or oxen, but as it turned out, this wolf mostly consumed aquatic animals, much like modern wolves in Alaska. In 2011, members of a tribe in northern Siberia found the remains of a steppe bison, perfectly preserved after being frozen for nearly 10,000 years. The bison was transported to the Yakutian Academy of Sciences, where scientists began to study it. Unlike other bison mummies discovered over the years, this one was almost entirely intact, with its internal organs in remarkable condition. Olga Potapova, collections curator at the Mammoth site of Hot Springs, explained that while bison mummies are not uncommon, they're usually incomplete, saying, quote, "Normally what you find with mummies of megafauna is partial carcasses, but this mummy was preserved so well that it earned a record for the level of its preservation." The bison, which was probably about 4 years old when it died, looked like it had starved to death. There was no fat around its abdomen, but its heart and digestive systems were pretty intact, even though some organs had shrunk over time. Researchers even managed to extract tissue samples from each organ, and for the first time ever, they found steppe bison brain tissue still preserved. In 2022, a nearly perfectly mummified baby woolly mammoth was discovered by a miner in the permafrost of Canada's Klondike goldfields, dating back around 30,000 years. The calf, thought to be around 1 month old when it died, was a female and measured just 4.5 feet long. Researchers described it as the most complete mummified mammoth found in North America. A lot of its skin and hair was still intact. As an Ice Age paleontologist, it had been one of my lifelong dreams to come face to face with a real woolly mammoth, said Grant Zazula, a paleontologist with the Yukon government, going on to describe the mammoth as, quote, "one of the most incredible mummified Ice Age animals ever discovered in the world." The discovery happened when a mine worker hit something unexpected while digging. The team stopped all their work and brought in geologists who managed to recover the mammoth's remains, and just in time because a storm had been rolling in. Analysis suggested that the mammoth may have died after getting trapped in mud while grazing, with grass found in her stomach. In 2018, yet another incredible discovery was made in Siberia. The nearly perfectly preserved mummified remains of an Ice Age horse, believed to have died between 30,000 and 40,000 years ago. Its body was so well preserved that even tiny details like the hairs in its nostrils and around its hooves were still visible. The foal was found deep in a crater, about 328 feet or 100 meters deep, during an expedition in Yakutia. It was around 2 months old when it died. The mummified body was almost entirely intact, with no visible damage. Scientists collected samples from the foal's hair and tissue and found it belonged to an extinct species known as the Lena horse, which was genetically distinct from the wild horses that still roam the area today. This species lived in Siberia tens of thousands of years ago and disappeared long before modern horses evolved. In 2016, biologist Steve Emsley was in southern Antarctica when he came across something kind of confusing. It looked to be a recently abandoned Adelie penguin colony. There were mummified chicks, guano stains, pebbles from nests, but the thing is, Adelie penguins hadn't been spotted in the region for centuries. What Emsley soon discovered was that the penguin remains were far older than anyone could have imagined. Radiocarbon dating of the bones, eggshells, and mummified skin showed that these penguins had been dead for thousands of years. The rapidly melting ice in Antarctica revealed these ancient penguin remains. The penguins had likely settled in the area during warmer periods when the sea ice melted early, allowing the birds to reach the area and build their nests. The most recent colony, which had been buried during the Little Ice Age about 800 years ago, was finally uncovered as the region's ice began to recede. What you're looking at here is a tardigrade, aka a water bear. Now, is this a newly discovered alien species? Well, I wish, but no, these things actually exist right here at home. They're just really, really tiny, which I'm thankful for, because imagine if that alien-looking thing was the size of just even a regular house cat. That would just be horrifying. Tardigrades, nicknamed water bears, are one of the most resilient animals on the planet. They're microscopic animals that are known for their ability to survive in very extreme conditions all over the world. In places like Antarctica, they've been found frozen in ice for thousands of years. And what's amazing about these things is their ability to go into a kind of state of suspended animation. When conditions are harsh, like extreme cold or dryness, tardigrades dry out or freeze and enter a kind of hibernation.
It had not been discovered before because it's under ice. At the end of the Ice Age, Greenland was one area which never lost its ice cover.
From microcontinents and ancient fossils to new bears and geopolitical competition, these Greenland discoveries will terrify you. Up first is the cracked cap. A massive piece of Greenland's ice cap just broke off from the ice sheet, and researchers are seriously concerned. The glacier is some 110 square kilometers in size, making it one of the most significant single losses of ice mass in Arctic history. To scientists, ecologists, and people who care about having an environment to live in, this is often considered pretty bad. But nations around the world and the corporations within them are seeing nothing but dollar signs. See, unlike the Antarctic, the Arctic is not a single impassable continent. It's an ice cap stretching down over several archipelagos and landmasses. For centuries, the Arctic has been nigh on impassable, as the ice is simply too thick and dangerous. But as the ice melts and the equator becomes unbearably hot, this ice will open up all sorts of new passageways through the Arctic. Claims over Arctic waterways are already being heavily sought as America, Russia, Canada, Norway, Denmark, and Finland jockey for position over who gets to control these potentially highly profitable trade routes. Next is the oldest DNA. A group of Danish researchers in Greenland made an incredible discovery, finding the oldest DNA ever. This fleck of genetic material was determined to be 2 million years old. That outstrips the previously oldest known DNA by 1 million years. The known history of life stretches back hundreds of millions of years, but only fossils, no DNA, can be recovered from that far back. This isn't just some shred of DNA either, but an actual readable genetic code, giving unparalleled insight into ancient biology. The researchers went into an area of Greenland where they were surrounded by 2-million-year-old mounds of dirt, and then began taking core samples. There were no fossils or remnants of bone, but by testing the soil, they were able to identify some actual strands of DNA. The special factor in Greenland, which allows DNA to survive for so long, are both the cold and minerals in the soil, which actually bind to the DNA and help to preserve it within the soil. It's unknown exactly where this DNA came from, but likely from one of any number of sources, as living creatures are shedding DNA constantly. Some of this, likely from excrement, was preserved inside the soil for 2 million years to eventually be discovered by these Danish researchers. Next is the microcontinent. It's estimated only 5% of the ocean has been observed, but that number is rapidly growing as scientists continue mapping the seafloor and making new discoveries. For instance, it was just recently discovered that there is in fact a microcontinent between Greenland and Canada, as a result of Greenland and Canada splitting apart, leading to the formation of the Davis Strait. This microcontinent began to be formed from the left-behind tectonic plate, now known as the Davis Strait microcontinent. This seems to indicate that tectonic plates are not solid masses, but can in fact fuse, split, and calve to form entirely new continents. Now, this isn't quite a full continent, in fact it's still a proto-microcontinent, but in another few million years this could very well become its own independent tectonic plate, influencing our world in as of yet unknown ways. Now, we won't be around to see it, and the formation has already been ongoing for 30 to 60 million years, but it is fascinating to understand that the world around us is continuing to change, that there is no end of history, and even if we're all gone, the fascinating tectonic movements of plates will continue on the Earth's crust. Next are new Greenland bears. Researchers were tasked with conducting a census and analysis of the polar bear population of Greenland, a population that is increasingly under threat. They would discover something totally different from their expectations though. Instead of the assumed single amorphous population covering the entire eastern coastline, it actually turns out there are two distinct and discrete polar bear populations in Greenland. The northeastern population has always been the most studied and most observed, as they're closest to human settlements, and it was assumed that they were emblematic of bears everywhere on on the landmass, but this is not so. There's a southeastern population of bears that live among the mountainous and dangerous fjords in the south. This area is highly remote and heavily isolated, with no human habitation existing in the area, which of course made investigation and research quite difficult, but not impossible. So researchers spent several months tracking and even tagging polar bears in this harsh environment. Shockingly, there were quite high densities of polar bears in the fjords, something which truly surprised the researchers as they did not expect such a healthy and robust population. After years of study, it was eventually observed that these bears hunted differently than the others, and almost never actually went out onto the sea ice, the traditional hunting ground of polar bears. This is because their sea ice is simply so fragmented and dangerous that it's no longer a viable environment for them to hunt within. These bears are a distinct population and likely haven't genetically mingled with the northern population for well over 200 years. Given enough time, these bears could well become their very own species. Next is the ice melange. Ice melt is a concerning trend in the world's climate, as melting ice raises sea levels and releases even more CO2, worsening the greenhouse effect and impacting ocean currents as well as coastlines and ecosystems throughout the world. But scientists just discovered a rather concerning addition to the threat. It turns out significantly more Arctic ice sheet, especially around Greenland, has melted than we thought. In fact, it's shed about a fifth more of its ice mass in the last 4 decades than scientists thought it had. This is seriously concerning, as it seems to indicate the issue is already significantly worse than we had believed, and we believed it to be near catastrophic already. Many are saying the Arctic ice sheet is now beyond saving, and the best we can hope for is to mitigate the potential devastation and hold on for the ride. Of 207 glaciers studied in the report, 179 of them experienced a significant reduction in size since 1985. Most of this ice loss actually comes from below the water level, where it's harder to track and where warm water currents can carve up the glacier. The rate of glacier calving from the ice sheet has also increased significantly. And finally is an ancient tundra. Researchers spent weeks making their way to a buried mountain, then proceeded to carve through 2 miles of ice sheet before getting down to the dirt below. Once they got there, they were stunned to discover several fascinating fossils from a bygone age where the ice sheet around Greenland had actually melted and exposed the soil beneath, leading to a flourishing tundra ecosystem. But as the ancient ice melted, it also raised the sea level, meaning only the tallest points of Greenland were left above water, making it almost a sort of archipelago. They found some fossilized mosses and other fungi, as well as Arctic willow, but even more interestingly, they discovered an insect's leg and a compound eye, giving an excellent view into the small creatures in the ancient Greenland landmass. However, this has raised a lot of fears that a similar melting of the ice could lead to the same ecosystem. Now, to be fair, in 2,000 years, the ecosystem would recover and diversify beautifully, but that doesn't really make the people living along the coastline feel any better about losing their homes.
From a red waterfall pouring out of an ancient glacier, to hidden lakes teeming with alien-like life, to a mind-blowing new map revealing the wild landscape under the ice, it's getting harder to ignore what's going down in Antarctica. These are terrifying discoveries in the South Pole scientists can no longer ignore. Antarctica has to be one of the most otherworldly places in the world. Most of it is buried under miles of ice, so for a long time nobody really knew what the land underneath even looked like. But we're starting to get a much better picture of it now. Scientists from the British Antarctic Survey just dropped the most detailed map ever made of what's hiding underneath all that ice. We're talking about over 60 years of data collected from satellites, aircraft, and ships, combined into one massive project called BedMap 3. And the result is a crazy detailed look at the actual shape of the continent without the ice. Turns out there are giant mountains, deep valleys, and one unnamed canyon in Wilkesland where the ice is over 4,700 meters thick or 15,420 feet. BedMap 3 is giving researchers a much clearer view of how the ice sheet connects with the land and the ocean, which is a big deal when it comes to figuring out sea level rise and how the ice might move in the future, so who knows what kind of cool discoveries are going to come to light in the very near future. There's a glacier in Antarctica that bleeds. Red liquid seeps out of the ice like something died in there. It's called the BLOOD Falls. It's one of the weirdest things on the continent. For a long time, nobody could figure out where the red color came from. People thought it was algae at first. Makes sense. Red stains usually means something biological, but it's not. It's salt water loaded with iron. And when that water hits the air, the iron oxidizes and turns red. Basically, it rusts. So what you're seeing is rusted salt water flowing out of a glacier like an open wound. But where does that water come from? It's not from melting ice, it's from a hidden lake trapped underneath the glacier, which has been cut off from the surface for millions of years. There's no sunlight down there, no oxygen, it's nothing, just cool, dark, high pressure water, but somehow there's still life in it. Microbes, tiny organisms that don't need light or air. They survive entirely on the chemical reactions in that trapped water. Pretty incredible. If life can survive in a place like that, under ice in total isolation, then maybe it can survive anywhere, even on frozen planets. That's not the only hidden lake in Antarctica. There are lots of lakes under the ice, not frozen lakes, liquid water, lakes that are buried under miles of ice, that have also been sealed off from the surface for millions of years. One of the most famous is Lake Vostok. It's about the size of Lake Ontario, but it sits nearly 2.5 miles under the surface. Scientists spent years drilling down to it, carefully trying not to contaminate it. When they finally pulled up water samples, what they found was complicated. There were signs of life, strange microbial life, but people argued over whether it was real or just contamination from the drill. Other subglacial lakes were also found, over 400 of them. In 2020, they confirmed microbes in one called Lake Mercer. These organisms don't rely on photosynthesis or oxygen. They live off chemicals in the rock and sediment. Basically, they just eat minerals and keep going. This kind of life changes everything. It's not like what we know. It doesn't need sunlight, warmth, or an atmosphere, and that means it could exist on other planets. Europa, Enceladus, potentially Mars, if it ever had underground water. Now, I think about 1% of the videos I do on here do not include any talk of pyramids, and this is not one of those videos. Let's talk about pyramids, the so-called Antarctica pyramids. If you've ever seen a photo of them, you know what I'm talking about. Giant triangle-shaped peaks sticking out of the snow. They seem to look way too symmetrical to be natural. People online love to claim they're evidence of some lost civilization like Atlantis or aliens. Here's what we actually know. These formations are real. You can find them on satellite images, and expeditions have even photographed them up close. The most famous is part of the Ellsworth Mountains, the highest mountain range in Antarctica. From certain angles, it looks exactly like a pyramid. Sharp edges, flat faces. Geologists say it's probably a type of mountain called Nunatak, basically a rocky peak that sticks out above the surrounding ice sheet. Wind and erosion can carve the rock into all kinds of shapes, and yeah, sometimes that shape just happens to look like something man-made. It's not impossible. Nature is weird, but there's more than one of these pyramid-shaped structures, and some of them are miles apart but still line up in a way that seems deliberate? Are they just coincidences? Maybe, but nobody's really gone down there with a proper team to study them closely. It's remote, expensive, and dangerous. Until someone does, they'll stay in that uncomfortable gray area. Maybe just extra pointy mountains, maybe something more. Deep Lake is one of the weirdest, most extreme environments on the planet. It hides what are called extremophiles, basically tiny life forms that just don't seem like they should be alive in such brutal conditions. Deep Lake is found in East Antarctica, and it's been sealed off from the outside world for thousands of years. The water is super salty, 5 to 10 times saltier than the ocean. The salinity is so high that the lake never freezes over, but there's no light down there, barely any nutrients, and it's in the middle of a frozen wasteland. It's not like the water's warm, it just doesn't freeze. Sounds like a place where life would go to die, except life hasn't died. Scientists have discovered entire communities of microbes living down there. They've completely adapted to the cold, the salinity, and the isolation. Some even have completely unique DNA sequences we haven't seen anywhere else. This raises two big questions. First, how the hell did they get there in the first place? And second, what else could be out there surviving in these impossible conditions? Because the more we look, the more we realize how little we actually understand about what counts as habitable. You'd think Antarctica would be the last place on Earth you'd worry about volcanoes. I mean, it's a frozen wasteland, right? Well, turns out not exactly. Underneath all that ice, there are at least 138 volcanoes, and some of them might still be active. Scientists only started finding these volcanoes recently, thanks to radar and satellite technology that can see through miles of ice. One of the biggest clusters is under the West Antarctic ice sheet. That's a problem, because if even one of those volcanoes erupts, it could destabilize the ice above it, and when that happens, massive chunks could slide into the ocean, raising sea levels around the world. Some researchers actually think eruptions might already be happening. Not big lava-spewing explosions, but geothermal activity strong enough to melt ice from below. They found areas where the ice is thinner than it should be, with strange plumes of heat rising from deep underground. Combine that with shifting ice and seismic activity, and it's hard to ignore. There's still a lot we don't know. The ice hides everything, and most of these volcanoes have never been studied up close. But the idea that an entire volcanic system is quietly simmering beneath the South Pole, that's not something you could just shrug off. If one of these hidden giants wakes up, the effects could be felt far beyond Antarctica. Next up, we have ghost anemones. These things were discovered clinging to the underside of Antarctica's Ross Ice Shelf, in a place so cold, so dark, and so cut off from the rest of the world, it feels like they shouldn't even exist, and yet there they were. Researchers found them by accident back in 2010. A team had drilled a hole nearly 900 feet down in the ice to drop some instruments into the water, but instead of just equipment readings, they got footage of these weird, translucent creatures hanging upside down, attached right onto the underside of the ice. No one expected to see life, let alone something this bizarre. They look like these tiny white flowers, but with tentacles, and they're animals, a new species of anemone never seen before. Nobody really knows how they're surviving. There's almost no light, no obvious food source. The temperatures are sub-zero, but these ghost anemones are just there, like they've always been. And here's where it gets extra weird. Anemones usually live on the sea floor, not the ceiling, so these things seem to have completely flipped the script on how we think marine life should behave. If you picture Antarctica, odds are you're thinking of endless snow, glaciers, maybe a few penguins. What you're probably not imagining is a rainforest. That's exactly what scientists found buried deep beneath the ice, the fossilized remains of an ancient forest that used to exist in the South Pole. Back in 2018, a research team drilling through the ice on the Amundsen Sea coast pulled up sediment cores from 90 feet down. Mixed in with the usual rock and mud were roots, pollen, and fossilized leaves, all from about 90 million years ago, when dinosaurs still roamed the Earth. Turned out that Antarctica wasn't always frozen solid. Back in the mid-Cretaceous period, it was warm and humid, kind of like modern-day New Zealand. Trees grew thick and tall, and the area would have been covered in dense, swampy forests. It was probably so warm there wasn't any ice at all at the poles during the time. Instead, Antarctica was home to ancient reptiles, insects, and who knows what else. Kind of crazy how well preserved some of this plant material is. Scientists could actually identify specific types of trees and ferns, which tells us a lot about the Earth's climate back then. Antarctica is said to be one of the quietest places on Earth, and it makes sense. If you've ever lived in a place with big snowfalls, you know how much the snow and ice can dampen sound. Plus, in Antarctica's case, there's nobody around, but beneath all that ice, the continent actually hums, literally. Scientists discovered this eerie low-frequency sound. The ice itself seems to be singing. It's not something you can hear with your ears unless it's sped up. But when researchers first recorded it, the noise was unsettling. Take a listen. So that was first picked up by seismic sensors planted on the Ross Ice Shelf, a slab of ice about the size of France. 2014, researchers noticed that the sensors were picking up steady vibrations, like the ice was pulsing. First they thought it might be wind or maybe equipment interference, but no, it was the ice itself vibrating. As winds whip across the surface and temperatures rise and fall, the snow dunes on top of the ice itself shift slightly. That movement creates pressure waves that travel through the ice, making it kinda sing. What's spooky about this though is that scientists now use it as a kind of warning system. When the ice starts singing differently, if the pitch shifts or the vibrations change, it might mean the shelf is weakening or cracking. If big chunks of Antarctica's ice shelves start to break apart, it can trigger a chain reaction that messes with sea levels around the world. So sometimes this singing is actually a bad omen. In 2022, satellite images of Antarctica picked up something weird. A rectangular opening carved into the side of a mountain. It looked like a doorway almost. Not a random crack or shadow, but this almost clean-looking geometric shape that seemed completely out of place somewhere as remote as Antarctica. Scientists were of course quick to say it was natural, but the image doesn't exactly scream random to some people, and it got some of them talking. Hidden base, ancient ruins. Some theories say it's man-made, maybe part of a secret military project. Others think it could be proof of a lost civilization, something wiped out in a forgotten chapter of Earth's history. Again, Atlantis-level stuff, but there hasn't been an official expedition to check it out, at least not that we know of. It's just not exactly at the top of anyone's to-do list.
Number 10. Abandoned whiskey. Alright, here we go. Part 1 and 2 of this list was pretty dark, so we'll kick this part 3 off with 10-year-old McKinley whiskey. An explorer found the crates in the hut of Ernest Shackleton. Inside were these frozen bottles of scotch, all the way from 1907. This may be the best discovery on this list, but it's been locked up, of course, obviously, such a historical find. But you'll be happy to know a sample was given to Scottish distiller White and Mackay. Yeah, they're currently studying this recipe to try and bring it back to life. Imagine seeing Ernest Shackleton's whiskey in stores, on shelves. I'd be like, oh, what? Okay, debit. Number 9, surgical notebook. Whenever explorers find notebooks, I'm so interested right off the bat. Maybe I've played too much Zelda, I don't know, but notebooks feel very national treasure to me when you find them. This notebook here once belonged to a surgeon, believe it or not. It's over 100 years old and it was found in a frozen hut in Antarctica, and the owner was George Levick. He was a photographer and of course a surgeon who traveled with the last expedition of Robert Scott. This expedition was from 1910 to 1913. Now the book itself was completely frozen and the bindings were completely toast, but the parts that they can read today is pretty historical. You can still read descriptions of photos that George took at Cape Adair. Like his first observation, all his notes that he took down, we can still read those, so it's amazing. Imagine in 100 years you find a notebook and it's just a bunch of like crazy S's that we used to draw back in school, like those pointy, like one of these, hang on. Haha, haha. This is Disney Channel, the guy would be like, he nailed it, that was perfect. Number 8, the Glacier Girl. Before you get worried, this next one is a plane, not a woman. I got your back. A P-23 aircraft was discovered in Greenland surrounded in ice. Now this was during World War II in July 1946, when 6 P-38 fighter planes were ordered to make an emergency landing in Greenland due to, lousy weather conditions and of course low visibility. The crew was saved, but the lockhead had to be abandoned, sadly, never to be seen again for 50 years. It was then dug out of 264 feet of snow and ice, and it took years to finally get this plane back in action. She's known as the Glacier Girl, and in 2007, Lewis Energy CEO Rodney Lewis bought the plane. Number 7, million-year-old plant. Back in 2019 in, of course, Greenland, a preserved fossil of a million-year-old plant was discovered. We love it. This was under the ice near a secret Cold War military camp. Yeah, an ancient flower found at a Cold War military camp. What a headline that would be. In 1959, Project Iceworm was underway. Now, I mentioned that project on this channel here before, and that in itself is a pretty bizarre frozen adventure in history, okay? Eventually, the project was scrapped and it was abandoned. Now, cut to 2019, it was rediscovered, and scientists at the University of Vermont found parts of a million-year-old flower. Not what you'd expect to find under a secret Cold War base, He's like, oh, it's kind of nice. The fragments were all so well preserved that it looked like the flower had died recently, not, a million years ago. Studying these plants can also provide clues on our future and where our current plants might end up. Number 6, 3 Inca mummies. Discovered by John Reinhardt on March 16, 1999 near the summit of Lilico, so around 7,000 meters up in the sky. This is near Argentina and Chile borders. This is far away. Further studies found that they were most likely sacrificed all in the name of a religious Inca ritual around the year 1500. Yeah, so quite a while ago. They were found in a small opening less than 2 meters deep under the ground, so again, this discovery was shocking. They looked like they were just asleep, but in reality, they died sometime around the 1500s. They're some of the most well-preserved mummies in the world. They now rest at an exhibition at the Museum of High Altitude Archaeology in Salta, Argentina. So specific, Museum of High Altitude Archaeology. Number 5, Allen Hills meteorite. Okay, this next one is literally out of this world, so buckle up. Back in December 1984, American meteor hunters discovered this fragment in Allen Hills, Antarctica. The meteor was appropriately named Allen Hills 84001, and this rock was speculated to come from Mars. And in 1996, a scientist claimed that he discovered bacteria from the microscopic fossils on the meteorite. Now, this news, of course, spread very quickly, and everybody started losing their goddamn minds. Bill Clinton even chimed in. He made a speech about possible discoveries in space, right? Everyone's freaking out. Could this be aliens? Yeah, the scientific community later said this was not the case after further studies, but hey, never say never. Feels like we're closer to finding life with James Webb right now, honestly. I'm afraid to hit refresh. It's like, here's 700 galaxies. You don't matter. I'm like, thanks, James. We love it. Keep snapping those pics. Number 4, Otzi the Iceman. Discovered in September 1991, this mummy was found on the border of Austria and Italy. He's Europe's oldest known natural mummy. Most of the 45-year-old man from the Copper Age was left in rather great condition, surprisingly. A 5,000-year-old man was found in ice, so I hate to say this, but you lose this round, Captain America. I see you in the comments. I'm sorry, I had to get you out of here one day. Before he passed away in the Italian Alps, Otzi had a number of health problems. He had arthritis, Lyme disease, he was lactose intolerant, which is just horrible. Thanks to science, we now know that Otzi the Iceman was sharpening his tools right before his untimely death. So he fought until the end. Number 3, 3 kittens. Don't worry, they are all okay. Spoiler alert. Had to throw that in because, you know, I care about you. Back in 2020, an oil worker named Drayton Dewish found 3 kittens all frozen to the ground near Drayton Valley. Now, it was mid-January, everything is frozen. This was near an oil well that he'd been working at. On Facebook, they posted about how the 3 kittens were all males and they were all dewormed, and now they were all living under the same roof, much warmer, with a happy family. So, happy ending, there we go. He got them out of the ice by using coffee to melt the ice. How amazing is that? I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Coffee saves lives. That's it. Double doubles? Ooh, every morning. I was frozen outside before, and then I was de-thawed myself with a nice French vanilla. Number 2, message in a frozen bottle. Okay, here we go. Now that song, Message in a Bottle, is gonna be stuck in everyone's head watching this. Best song from Guitar Hero 2, hands down. That and Surrender by Cheap Trick. What a time, right? So fun. Anyways, back in 1959, back on track, a geologist named Paul Walker, great name, buried a message in a bottle. He wanted to make a lasting statement about climate change, so he put this frozen message underneath rocks near a glacier in 1959. And then cut to 2013, what do we find? Said message in a bottle. The message inside was to measure the length from that point to the edge of a glacier, but by 2013, said glacier had shrunk down 200 feet. So the scientist really did show us. He was like, trust me, in 50 years, I'm gonna get you with this. Imagine he put the wrong note in. They open it up, it just says milk, eggs, bread. Is this a grocery list? This is definitely a grocery list. God damn it. Number 1, Ice Age art. Ancient artwork, this time from the Colombian Amazon. Thing is, unlike other drawings found in the ceilings of tombs, this canvas stretched about 8 miles and it was all frozen. It was just a wasteland. This should have never been found. The paintings are even more impressive. They date back to 12,000 years ago. These were made near the end of the last ice age. Yeah, the end of the last ice age, we're doing doodles. Are you kidding me? I can't even go to the store if it's snowing out. I'm like, nah, I'm just gonna order in, screw that. This guy's making art. Miles of art. These were found in 2017, but it was only last year where they went public with said findings. Those findings being paintings of elephants, massive sloths, horses from the Ice Age, snakes, birds, deer, etc. This is now one of the largest collections of rock art in South America. Yeah, is it pregnant women or the origins of the Ninja Turtles? Art, we don't know. Couldn't tell you.
And we are kicking things off with the 3,000-year-old arrow. This is a super recent discovery, just happened back in September. A glacial archaeologist named Espen Finstad was hiking through the Jotunheim Mountains in eastern Norway when he came across a wooden arrow. It was so well preserved that to the naked eye, it would probably look brand new. It even still had feathers on it. But Finstad estimated that this arrow was actually around 3,000 years old. He later determined it was likely used by a hunter in the late Stone Age to early Bronze Age. Finstad stated, "What makes the arrow so impressive is its preservation. Though it is broken into 3 parts, the arrow remains attached to the shaft, as do the feathers, known as fletchings, which help to stabilize the arrow's flight path." So this is just one of the many artifacts turning up, once frozen under, thick layers of ice, not just in Norway, but in cold climates all around the world as glaciers continue to melt. If you are enjoying our content so far, if you're new here, hit that subscribe button and don't forget to leave your thoughts, your comments, complaints down below. I'll usually read them. At number 9, we have Mummy Juanita. Mummy Juanita, also known as the Ice Maiden or Lady of Ampato, is an exceptionally well-preserved mummy of an Inca girl which was discovered in 1995. The mummy was found on Mount Ampato, a dormant volcano in the Andes Mountains of southern Peru, by anthropologist Johann Reinhard and his team. Mummy Juanita is believed to have lived during the Inca Empire, making her one of the best preserved ancient bodies ever found. She was approximately 12 to 14 years old at the time of her death. The mummy was found at an altitude of about 20,600 feet, and her discovery was kinda accidental. Reinhard and his team were actually on a mission to recover another Inca mummy when they stumbled on her in a crevice. She was wrapped in several layers of colorful textiles and buried with various offerings, including ceramic and metal objects, food items, and small statues. She was probably sacrificed as an offering to the Inca gods. The mummy is currently on display in the Catholic University of Santa Maria's Museum of Andean Sanctuaries in Peru. So get over there immediately. Tap on her glass encasing and tell her Uncle James said hello. First person in the comments to do that will receive a wink emoji from me and a $10 gift certificate to Walden Books. Number 8, the Mammoth Mummy. No, this is not a giant-sized human mummy. That would be pretty awesome. This is pretty awesome too, but it's a mummified woolly mammoth. In 2010, a team of Russian scientists found a well-preserved mammoth in Siberia, later named Yuka. She was a young mammoth, about 6 to 8 years old, and lived around 39,000 years ago. Yuka's body was in really good shape. Its body measured about 2.5 meters in length, and it was remarkably intact, with her trunk, bones, some of her flesh, hair, and even eyes still preserved, making her one of the most well-preserved mammoth specimens ever found. It's pretty incredible to see, not that I've ever seen it in person, but based on pictures and video that I have seen of it, crazy how well preserved it is. Finding a dinosaur in this condition would be absolutely unreal. Anyway, they think she might have fallen into a mud pit or drowned, which helped to preserve her so well. People probably butchered her for meat, as there were cut marks on her bones. Scientists studied her DNA to learn more about mammoths and their connection to modern elephants. Right now, Yuka is currently being held in Moscow. Next up, we have the Greenland Norse textiles. These textiles are a collection of ancient fragments discovered in 1921 in various archaeological sites in Greenland. The textiles provided insights into the types of clothing and weaving techniques of the Norse settlers who lived in Greenland during the medieval period. The sites where these fabrics were found are part of the remnants of Norse settlements in Greenland, which thrived between the 10th and 15th centuries. Fabrics discovered include woolen garments and household items. They were remarkably well preserved due to the cold and dry climate of Greenland, which helped prevent decay. The textiles had a bunch of different weaving patterns, colors, and designs that reflected the skill and artistry of the Norse weavers back in the day. It's interesting to see what their clothing looked like beyond depictions of them in ancient artwork. These fabrics have also been useful in understanding the challenges faced by the Norse settlers in Greenland and how they adapted to the harsh environment. And at number 6, we have the Kostenki 17 artifacts. The Kostenki 17 artifacts were discovered at the Kostenki site in Russia, an archaeological site known for its wealth of Upper Paleolithic finds. The artifacts discovered at the site include bone and antler tools, bone ornaments, and various artifacts made from organic materials. Archaeologists dug up a number of bone and antler tools like spear points, knives, and needles, tools that had been crafted with remarkable precision. They also found ornaments made from bone like beads and pendants. On top of that, there were plenty of hunting tools like projectile points, along with bones of animals that they had hunted. Some other notable discoveries at the site were engraved objects and fragments. These engravings often depict animals in geometric patterns, showcasing the type of artwork they would have made at the time. At our number 5 spot, we have the Siberian Ice Maiden, also known as the Princess of Ukok or the Altai Princess. This is a mummy of a young woman that was discovered in 1993 in the Ukok Plateau of the Altai Mountains in Siberia. The Siberian Ice Maiden was discovered by Russian archaeologist Natalia Polosmak in a tomb on the Ukok Plateau. The site was located at an altitude about 8,200 feet. The mummy is believed to date back to around 500 BC, making her approximately 2,500 years old. The mummy was found in a wooden sarcophagus covered with felt blankets and a cowhide rug. She was dressed in intricately woven garments made of wool and felt that was also adorned with jewelry, earrings, a necklace, various ornaments made of gold and other precious metal. So it's likely she held a high social status within the community. Her burial seemed to have been part of a complex ritual too, which led the archaeologists to believe she could have been a priestess or a noblewoman. Number 4, the Etherican brown bear. 2019, scientists made a pretty cool discovery in Siberia. A thousands-year-old brown bear carcass preserved in the permafrost. The ancient brown bear carcass was discovered by reindeer herders. It was incredibly well preserved because of the permafrost conditions, which prevented decay. The carcass dates back approximately 3,500 years, placing it in the late Bronze Age. This age estimation was made through radiocarbon dating, a technique used to determine the age of organic materials based on their content of carbon-14 isotopes. Next on the list is Quede Dan Shinichi, which was the name given to a remarkably well-preserved body discovered at the Tatshenshini Alaska Provincial Park in British Columbia, Canada. Quede Dan Shinichi was discovered by hunters in the remote wilderness northwestern British Columbia. The body was found partially buried in the ice, surrounded by a variety of artifacts. He was believed to have lived over 550 years ago, around the early 15th century, a member of one of the indigenous tribes that inhabited the region during that time. The body's preservation was due to the glacier ice, which acted as a natural freezer, protecting the remains from decomposition. And along with the body, again, a variety of artifacts were discovered. There was a robe made from animal hides, a spruce root hat, a woven mat, a walking stick, various tools made from stone and bone. The body was then ceremonially reburied in 2000 following traditional rituals and protocols. Coming in at number 2, we have the Landbreen tunic. In 2011, during archaeological excavations in Landbreen, Norway, this ancient piece of clothing was discovered. The tunic was a remarkable archaeological find, revealing more information about ancient Norse clothing and textile techniques. The Landbreen site in the mountains of Norway was once frequented by travelers during the Roman Iron Age, approximately 300 to 500 AD. Because of the ice and snow in the region, many artifacts, including textiles, have been incredibly well preserved. And the tunic, it's made of wool, dates back to around 230 AD. It's a tunic-style garment with a natural brown color, a simple design. It has a twill weave, a pattern commonly used in textiles in that era. Just think of how much of our clothing, by the way, is going to be left behind after we eventually leave Earth or go extinct, let alone all our other crap. We churn out so much stuff on a constant basis, more so than at any point in history. I think finding stuff from this era is going to be so common in the future that it'll be more of a nuisance rather than a remarkable find. Finally though, taking that number 1 spot is Otzi the Iceman. Now, why is this number 1? I don't know, not really any particular ranking going on here, just a good one to close off with. In September of 1991, hikers Helmut and Erika Simon stumbled upon a well-preserved human corpse high in the Alps near the border of Austria and Italy. Later known as Otzi the Iceman, the two hikers saw the remains and actually thought he could have died relatively recently. But no, Otzi was an ancient human who had lived over 5,000 years ago during the late Neolithic period. He was so well preserved because he'd been encased in ice for that thousands and thousands of years. His body was found in the Ötztal Alps. The discovery site was in the Schnalzalval-Sanalis Valley, a region that was once covered by glaciers completely. Scientists discovered that Otzi lived between 3359 and 3105 BCE, making him one of the oldest and most well-preserved naturally mummified humans ever found. He was 5'5" and weighed around 110 pounds. The age at the time of his death was estimated to be around 45 years old. Besides his body, researchers also found a bunch of artifacts and clothing items with him. A copper axe, a quiver of arrows, a bearskin cap, and a coat made of woven grass and hide. Otzi's remains and belongings are currently housed in the South Tyrol Museum of Archaeology in Bolzano, Italy.
Next up is one of the most hair-raising discoveries, a 30,000-year-old virus revived from Siberian permafrost. Dubbed Pithovirus sibericum, this giant virus is one of the largest ever found, and its revival in a controlled laboratory setting stunned scientists worldwide. Unlike most viruses that are quickly degraded by time, Pithovirus lay dormant, perfectly preserved in ice. Its reawakening not only highlights the incredible resilience of viral particles, but also raises some important questions about the risks of ancient pathogens re-emerging as global temperatures rise. Researchers are studying its structure and genetic makeup to understand how viruses evolve over millennia. While there's no immediate danger to modern life, the discovery underscores the delicate balance between nature's hidden past and the challenges of our changing climate. Siberia's permafrost isn't just a graveyard for large creatures, it's also a sanctuary for tiny, resilient bacteria. Scientists have isolated bacterial strains that have been dormant for tens of thousands of years, reviving them in laboratory experiments. One such strain belongs to a group of bacillus species known for their extraordinary survival skills in extreme conditions. These microbes have adapted in a way that allow them to withstand not only freezing temperatures, but also high radiation and low nutrient levels. The genetic makeup of these ancient bacteria is revealing unexpected adaptations, mechanisms that could inspire new biotechnological applications, from novel antibiotics to enzymes that function under harsh industrial conditions. Such discoveries provide a fascinating look at the resilience of life and the possibility that even the simplest organisms can thrive in the most unforgiving environments. Their story is a testament to nature's ingenuity and the enduring legacy of life through the ages. Deep beneath the Siberian surface lie ice cores that are nothing short of climate history books. These long cylindrical samples of ice have trapped layers of air, dust, and even volcanic ash from thousands of years ago. By analyzing these tiny bubbles of ancient atmosphere, scientists can reconstruct the Earth's climate history in astonishing detail. These ice cores reveal shifts in greenhouse gas concentrations, temperature fluctuations, and even clues about past solar activity. For instance, layers enriched with volcanic ash hint at massive eruptions that temporarily cooled the planet, while varying gas compositions tell stories of natural climate cycles. Beyond their importance for understanding global warming, these records provide a baseline against which we can measure human impact on today's climate. Each layer in an ice core is like a page in Earth's diary, a narrative that not only informs us about the distant past, but also guides our predictions for the future. It's kind of like a perfect blend of history, science, and a little bit of detective work hidden in the ice. Siberia's frozen expanses aren't just a repository for terrestrial relics, they are also a treasure trove of space rocks. The continent's harsh climate means that meteorites, which might otherwise weather away in warmer regions, remain pristinely preserved in ice. Over the decades, meteorite hunters and scientists have uncovered fragments that offer invaluable clues about the early solar system. One particularly intriguing meteorite revealed unusual isotopic compositions, sparking fresh theories about how our solar system formed and evolved. These cosmic visitors are like natural laboratories, each carrying the chemical signatures of processes that predate even the Earth itself. Their study not only helps us understand the building blocks of our planet, but also inform us about the wider universe. Hidden within the icy tombs of the Altai Mountains lies one of Siberia's most enchanting archaeological finds, the Ice Maiden. This remarkably preserved mummy, discovered among the burial mounds of the ancient Pazyryk culture, offers an intimate look at a lost world. The Ice Maiden's delicate tattoos, intricately embroidered clothing, and ornate jewelry provide a window into the spiritual and daily life of these nomadic peoples. Her burial site, complete with ceremonial artifacts, suggests that she held a significant position within her community. The precision of her preservation has allowed scientists to study not just her physical attributes, but also the materials and techniques used in her adornments, sparking debates about trade routes and cultural exchanges in the ancient world. The Ice Maiden is definitely more than a frozen body. It's like a storyteller whose silent whispers continue to intrigue historians and archaeologists, revealing the artistry and sophistication of a people long forgotten. Among the icy relics of Siberia are seeds that have withstood the test of time. Literally. Preserved in permafrost for thousands of years, these seeds have occasionally shown the ability to germinate under the right conditions. Scientists are fascinated by these natural time capsules as they hold the genetic blueprints of ancient plant species that once thrived in a very different world. By comparing these ancient seeds with their modern descendants, researchers can trace evolutionary changes and shifts in plant biodiversity over millennia. In controlled experiments, some of these seeds have sprouted, offering a rare opportunity to study traits that might have been lost over time. These findings not only provide insights into the resilience of life, but also raise intriguing questions about de-extinction and biodiversity conservation. In the frozen depths of Siberia, every seed is a whisper from the past, a living relic that connects us to ecosystems long vanished, yet still influential in today's world. Not all the frozen giants of Siberia were herbivores. Among the finds are the formidable remains of cave lions, the apex predators of the Ice Age. These predators, whose fossils have been remarkably well preserved in permafrost, offer critical insights into the evolution and adaptations of large carnivores. Detailed studies of their bones reveal specialized features, robust jaw structures, powerful limbs, and unique skull formations that hint at their hunting strategies and social behavior. Cave lions roamed vast territories, and their remains help scientists piece together the ecological dynamics of ancient predator-prey relationships. Beyond their role in the food chain, these fossils also allow researchers to explore genetic links between extinct species and their modern relatives, deepening our understanding of evolutionary biology. Every bone and claw encased in Siberian ice is a fragment of a larger story about survival, adaptation, and the relentless march of time in one of Earth's most extreme environments. While the giants of the Ice Age often steal the spotlight, the tiniest creatures can be just as revealing. Deep in the Siberian ice, scientists have uncovered an array of insect fossils, delicate remnants that offer a window into ancient ecosystems. These fossils include remarkably detailed impressions of wings, exoskeletons, and even some internal structures that are rarely preserved elsewhere. Studying these minute fossils helps researchers understand how insect populations responded to dramatic climate shifts, providing clues about biodiversity and ecological resilience. Some of these insect remains date back tens of thousands of years, capturing evolutionary snapshots of species that once played crucial roles in pollination and the food chain. Despite their small size, these frozen insects are powerful storytellers. They remind us that even the most inconspicuous organisms can hold the keys to understanding our planet's dynamic past, and they challenge us to consider how life, in all of its varied forms, adapts and survives through the ages. Beyond the realms of biology and climate, Siberian ice has also preserved mysterious man-made artifacts that continue to puzzle historians. In various excavations, researchers have discovered tools, ornaments, and even fragments of what appear to be ceremonial objects, all embedded in the permafrost. These artifacts, some intricately crafted from metal and stone, offer clues about ancient human cultures and their technological prowess. Their design and craftsmanship often defy easy explanation, hinting at trade networks, cultural exchanges, and the deep-seated understanding of the natural world that we are only beginning to comprehend.
Coming in strong at number 10, we have zombie worms. Wow. Worms frozen for over 40,000 years were found in the melting Siberian permafrost. As the Earth warms up, tiny nematodes were discovered, having been officially dead for 42,000 years. Guess what? When the frozen worms were warmed up, they came back to life. Now scientists are studying them to see exactly how they managed to survive such a lengthy freeze. Answers could help us with our own journey to viable medical freezing. Also, this isn't the last you'll hear about the good old permafrost and its Pandora's box of uglies. Stay tuned. Coming in at number 9, I actually think this is really weirdly cute. We have an ancient woolly mammoth. Yeah, I do really find this dead animal carcass cute, and I don't know what that means for me. Found in a Siberian ice tomb, the surprisingly intact and hairy carcass dates back 39,000 years, and the most amazing thing is that it actually still had blood in its veins, which means that maybe, just maybe, one day we could clone it. Can you even imagine? From this discovery, we could bring back woolly mammoths, fluffy elephants. I'm here for them. Woolly mammoths mostly died out 10,000 years ago, but some were walking the earth as recently as 4,000 years ago. The female mammoth was found in the New Siberian Islands area and has gone on tour in parts of the world so people can see a slice of the history it represents. Anyone else find it cute? Let me know. Coming in at number 8, we have the mystery circles. Whoa, take a look at these circles. Who made them? Was it aliens? I feel like the answer is always probably aliens. Before we talk about the circles and exactly who made them, I want to talk to you about the frozen lake on which they were found. This is Lake Baikal, the deepest lake in the world and the holder of 22% of the Earth's fresh water. Lake Baikal is 1,642 meters deep, so as you can imagine there are all kinds of hidden fishy mysteries in there. Half of the year the lake is very frozen, and in 2010 mystery ice circles appeared, sparking alien conspiracies. In the end, it turns out the circles were the work of an artist called Jim Denovan, who said that actually it was the largest work of its kind in the world. While this may not have been the work of aliens, it does seem that the lake has been producing naturally occurring strange circles that have been noted by astronauts on the International Space Station. As of yet, we don't have an answer for those. We're back with the permafrost at number 7. We have good old anthrax. What fresh hell is lurking under the thawing permafrost? Oh, anthrax. Good. Great. In 2016, one boy died after contracting anthrax, and 250,000 reindeer had to be culled. This was all when an ancient strain of the deadly substance was unleashed in Siberia. Where did it come from? Everyone's favourite mystery bag, the permafrost. It seems with global warming, ancient viruses that have laid dormant under ice for thousands of years are being unleashed once again, and we have no modern cures. Hip hip hooray. While we know modern day anthrax, ancient strains are quite different. Also, we kind of have an understanding of anthrax, but it's heavily speculated that there are all kinds of hellish pathogens that we haven't met yet. We haven't seen them as modern humans, so being exposed to them could be very dangerous. If we were now suddenly exposed to them, we could get deathly ill from sicknesses that we don't yet have cures to. Coming in at number 6, we have meteor rocks. Can you imagine a fireball from space breaking up and raining hot rocks from the sky? Honestly, that would be crazy. So in 2013, a meteor exploded over the small town of Larissa Vybayakova in Siberia. The impact blew out windows and made for quite the racket, but the people of the town got very excited. They were quick to go out foraging in the snow for the space rocks and were keen to sell them in excess of thousands of American dollars. Now, according to an article in the New York Times, under Russian law a person can gain legal title to a meteorite, but only if it's reported to the authorities and submitted to a lab for tests. Now, the laboratory will charge 20% of the estimated value of the object for certification. Who knows what little slices of space that these rocks are containing? Could there be signs of alien life? Oh, back once again. Hello, permafrost. What have you got for us this time? Coming in at number 5, we have mercury. Mercury is a deadly substance, and should it enter the food chain, well, it wouldn't be good. It seems that the world's largest reservoir of mercury is currently frozen in Siberia. As our mate the permafrost melts, a motherload of mercury is waiting to be unleashed and pollute the environment. Mercury poisoning can cause brain issues and birth defects. The amount of mercury in the permafrost regions is 10 times higher than mercury introduced to the atmosphere from burning coal over the last 30 years, just to give you some perspective. Coming in at number 4, we have the doorway to the underworld. Near the Yana River basin in Siberia, there is a super big crater, and honey is just getting bigger. Why? Well, it seems like the ice around it is melting, making the land erode. Now, this has come as a result of deforestation. The ground is no longer shaded by trees, which means it gets a full beat of the sun in the summer months, meaning accelerating melting. Officially called the Batagayka crater, locals call it the doorway to the underworld, and they avoid it like the plague. As it keeps on growing, maybe that's a good shout. Although that being said, the earth underneath it has been frozen for thousands of years. As the ground thaws, there are probably some really interesting and no doubt scary discoveries to be made in the pit. Hello there, at number 3 we have an alien! Aliens in Russia. Honestly, sounds like a really good band name. I'm gonna write that down. It seems in October 2017, a man discovered what appeared to be a dead alien buried in the snow. The extraterrestrial hunter filmed the incident and sold the footage to a Russian TV channel. It received national news coverage, and people were very excited, but understandably quite concerned. Luckily for us, it was uploaded to YouTube, so you can see all the bluish, yellowish looking mutated corpse for yourself. Do you want to look? Don't say I never treat you. Ugh, I don't like that. Really grim. So it turns out the Russian Interior Ministry waded in and called the video a hoax, sensationally claiming that actually the corpse was made up using mulched up bread and chicken skin. Ugh. But I have to say, could there be another reason the Kremlin is calling the footage a hoax? Maybe Russia knows about aliens, has aliens, and they don't want us to know about it. Conspiracies with Rebecca. You're welcome. Coming in at number 2, we have the monster. What is this monster all about? I have no idea. This monster was found by miners in the Sakha Republic area of Siberia. It appears to be some kind of small, unidentified mummified beast with a bird-like stance and fangs. I don't like fangs. As we know, plenty of ancient animals have been found in Siberia, but at the moment we have no idea what on earth this wee beastie could be. Scientists working with the carcass believe it can be dated back to the Mesozoic era, which would put it anywhere between 66 million and 252 million years old. By the look of this fanged monster, I'm honestly quite glad I wasn't alive back in those days. Yes, I have saved the scariest till number 1. You're welcome. It's 54 severed heads. Brilliant. Okay, warning, this is actually pretty grim, so if you want to look away, do it. I don't blame you. So in March 2018, a bag containing 54 severed frozen heads was found in the snow near the Siberian city of, I'm gonna try and pronounce it, Khabarovsk. You're probably watching from Siberia thinking, no, that's not how you say it, Rebecca, but I'm thinking the important thing here is the 54 severed heads. So first up, one hand was found, and then 27 pairs of hands all lined up in a row in the snow. Now, if the dismembered body parts were part of some kind of Easter egg hunt, it was all just the beginning. It all led to the bag of severed heads. Now, if you don't want to see the severed hands, maybe close your eyes now because I do want to show you a picture. Bam! Bandages and hospital-style plastic shoe covers were reportedly found with the grisly haul. Were these the hands and heads of murder victims, or is there another explanation? Theories in the local media say that they could be discarded waste from medical students. Honestly, whatever it is, why were they arranged in rows like that? I don't like it, it makes me feel queasy. Take it back, Siberia. I don't want any of this.